Hello and welcome to the Miko Bits Show. If you're having trouble keeping up with what's new in Bitcoin, blockchain, and DeFi, it seems sometimes like a full-time job. Well, it turns out that it is my full-time job. I'm a venture capitalist. I do have a professional team, and we work pretty hard every day to keep up with this fast-paced industry. With the Miko Bits show today, I've got a very exciting guest, Tyler from Barnbridge, and he's working on some very interesting things with risk tokenization. Has a pretty exciting background in financial services, so we will get a good chance to talk about these topics on this podcast. But what I do want to say first and foremost is that this is an entertainment show. It is not intended to be investment advice. So if you want investment advice, get a duly licensed professional. I guess without further ado, here's Tyler. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be on it. I've been looking forward to this. I've watched your show a couple times, and I've followed you through the years on Twitter, and yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Well, I really appreciate it. And, I'm very excited about the stuff you're working on with tokenization of risk. We have had a number of guests recently on in the derivative space. So, we've talked with Delta Exchange, we talked with Opium Exchange, we talked with a whole bunch of folks. We're going to have a show with Vega Protocol, obviously Kain Warwick from Synthetics. So we've had, UMA. So we've had a number of shows that really relate to kind of marketizing risk and kind of creating new instruments. So, I think in that context, we're very excited to have you on our show and, talk about some really powerful and interesting DeFi products associated with risk tokenization. So let's jump right in. So I think the first segment is, I guess the first things is, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit in terms of your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tyler Ward. I'm one of the co-founders of Barnbridge. Barnbridge, as Miko said, is a risk tokenization protocol. Before Barnbridge, I've worked in crypto for quite a long time. Around late 2016, I got involved. I really got excited around the prospect of Ethereum, more so. I think what originally stuck with me was the ability to write if-then statements into money in a permissionless way. I think that was something that, due to my background, I really saw a lot of potential and opportunity there. My original One of my first jobs out of school, when I came out of college with a finance degree, was working as a fixed income trader. I worked for a subsidiary of JP Morgan, and we were essentially unloading illiquid debt positions that it took them years to unravel what was in those underlying securities that caused the crisis in 2017. So like in 2012, it took them like 5 years to get those out of there. I moved into software because a lot of my clients were private equity and they had like venture capitalist wings. And just due to some of the contacts that I made, I got really interested in software, and I went through a couple exits in like a software sales capacity as like an enterprise software salesperson. Kind of fast forward, I was working for myself. I had a couple e-commerce companies that I started throughout the years, and basically through that mechanism, I was working a lot in like UI, UX, design, marketing, and I started an agency. And through that agency, I met a guy named Harrison Hines, who started Token Foundry. He introduced me to Joe Lubin and Andrew Keys and all of them. And I pretty much have been in crypto full time since that point. So through all the down years, I continued to build and was really excited about. I don't think I ever lost faith, but I was worried everybody else was going to lose faith at one point.
Yeah, that's really great. I think it's important to understand this kind of context. It's great to kind of hear some of these, OG names. So can you tell me what the problem is that you solve at Barnbridge?
Yeah, that's a good question because I think one of the things that I hear a lot is people will basically say like you should kind of create products that you would want to use yourself. And I think in the early stages of my like entrepreneurial career, I was just kind of creating what I could create as opposed to fixing kind of larger problems. And I'm not, I wouldn't necessarily say that approaching it from a problem perspective is the way that I would look at it. But you could, I mean, you could call it a problem. So basically, in the middle of the down markets in 2009, well, sorry, 2019. I originally wrote the Barnbridge white paper in like April of 2019. And I think like the industry wide problem that we've seen in crypto for a long time is like when are the institutions essentially going to move into crypto? And um, I don't think Barnbridge completely fixes the problem that is holding a lot of institutions back. I think we need better on-chain and off-chain insurance primitives. But I do think that Barnbridge fixes a major bucket, which is how do you hedge out the underlying volatility in all of these assets, and then even on the yield side, how do you normalize some of the risk of how fast the interest rates can fluctuate in crypto? So basically, in the middle of 2019, or kind of yeah, probably the middle of 2019, I was working with Andrew Keys at Dharma Capital. He was trying to
Yeah.
sell he was trying to sell Ethereum to State Street and some of these really large financial institutions. And I live in the same town as Mark Yusko, who's now an investor in Barnbridge. And I was trying to sell him on Ethereum and DeFi for years. And same thing. I mean, he was trying to sell Bitcoin to very, very large institutions like a CalPERS. And, he was having difficulty even getting like, smaller money managers interested in crypto. And the generalized reason is the underlying assets in crypto, they fluctuate way too much for people to feel comfortable taking a position in them, even if their like clients are interested in crypto. And I think we can see that as like, ETH's at $1,300 right now. It was at $80 only a couple months ago. And you can say the same of Bitcoin. So what I started thinking about is that every dollar that makes up like the value of a Bitcoin or of an Ether, it doesn't deserve the same risk and return. So I basically took the concept of tranching that came from collateralized debt obligations, and I started thinking if you put pools of money into smart contracts, you can basically create proofs of risk or proofs of liquidity that represent your risk in the pool. And if you split those out into two different tranches, you can have a lower risk tranche and a higher risk tranche. In TradFi, they call that senior and junior tranches. And basically, you can algorithmically program the way that those two tranches behave in terms of how they get risk and reward and upside and downside swings. So that was the original concept around Barnbridge. Fast forward about a year, maybe a little over a year later, we're in the middle of like the DeFi, the original leg up of the DeFi boom, which is around August. And I had invested in synthetics at a very low amount. And it went up to $7. I basically wanted to take some risk off the table. And I was a little let down that nobody had come up with a concept around Barnbridge up to that point. And so I basically emailed Kain and asked him if he would, steal the idea. Synthetics was busy. So he kind of said, I'll help fund it. He helped a lot in the early stage ideation. And he also did, in fact, help fund it. So basically, I really created Barnbridge because it's something that I would use myself. The ability to have a tokenized representation of an underlying asset's alpha swing. So like if ETH goes from 100 to 110, there's $10 of alpha. If I was in a low risk tranche, maybe I only get $3 of that upside. The flip side is if it goes down $10, the higher risk side takes a $7 hit. The lower risk side only takes a $3 hit. And that actually really matters on all of the yield farming. If you're just like lending money to Aave, you can also basically take that yield stream, which is coming from a variable annuity, and you can say, I want to just lock in a fixed interest rate and someone else can bet on the upside. Or maybe I think interest rates are going up and I want to basically bet on the upside by ensuring a fixed rate on the other side for someone. So the ability to have these tokenized tradable representations of your risk in another pool somewhere is really powerful, because if you kind of extrapolate it, you can move from like a low risk chain link position into a high risk yield stream on Aave. And then, it's just one transaction. So basically, through not only kind of my realization that a lot of the traditional finance institutions needed this from my exposure to Mark and Andrew, just me as a degen, I also realized that it was something that I wanted to use on a more granular scale. And I think maybe back in, April of 2019, when I was originally trying to raise for it, I don't think anybody knew what I was talking about or why there was going to be a need for this type of software. But fortunately, the second time around, there was a lot more people familiar with DeFi, a lot more people familiar with why it was growing so much. And so, yeah, kind of the second shot at Barnbridge was a lot more successful than the first time around.
I like that. And, to me, I think one of the things that I'm seeing here is, if you look at the name, right, you've got a barn and you've got a bridge, right? And to me, I think about the barn and I think, well, who works in a barn, right? It's a farmer, right? So who could that be? Well, it feels like it has kind of the vibe of like Harvest Protocol, or has a vibe of like, even some of the food coins, although it doesn't go so degen as that, right? So it's not talking about yams or this kind of thing, but it's definitely a barn, right? So that's one. And then the other thing that it pops up for me is this bridge, right? So for the idea of a bridge, one place that DeFi people go when they see bridge is they think, oh, cross-chain bridge, but no, not really. Like, I think of this more like a traditional finance kind of DeFi finance kind of bridging, right? So it sort of feels more like traditional to DeFi. So I think there is a barn and a bridge in here if I don't miss my guess.
Yeah. So the name was kind of serendipitous, where like you've got the yield farmers, and we didn't want it to be a food coin. In fact, I think one of the reasons for Barnbridge's success was when it came out, there were a lot of those food coins were kind of copy and pasting and mixing ideas that already existed. And Barnbridge was something that had been kind of thought up and thought through a lot further back in the middle of the down market. So, but to be brutally honest, I don't know if this is like something that gets the community excited or it's kind of a letdown. Is the name was truly just like serendipitous. Like I named it Barnbridge before we called ourselves yield farmers, before food coins ever existed.
Amazing.
It was I just thought that it sounded like an arbitrary name that a traditional financial institution could look at and basically say, I mean, like, what does Goldman Sachs mean? It's people's names. And then there's Black Rock. And so I was watching Beetlejuice, the movie, and there's a scene in Beetlejuice that they bust a car out of a barn, like a bridge that looks like a barn. And
wow.
I found out later it's called a covered bridge. But I Googled it and I was like, wow, there's like no SEO around this name.
That's great.
And so fast forward, so it was completely serendipitous that the name just worked out to be so perfect for where the industry is right now. But then the other side of it is the name went up for expiry. One night I was like drinking whiskey, and I wasn't like hammered, but I had like a drink or two of whiskey and liquid courage. and it said like, do you want to renew Barnbridge .io, because we bought the .com later. And I remember like I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, I don't know if I want to renew it because it's $50 to renew a .io. And so I read the white paper again, and I was like, man, this is like really, really, really needed right now. And that's that night I emailed Kain. I emailed a couple people. I emailed Kain, Joe Lubin, I think Set Protocol. And Kain was the only person that responded, and he's like, I love this idea, and I want to help, basically. So yeah.
That's
I
a
knew long
great
before I knew
story.
that.
It's so fun to get stories like that on the show because it definitely sounds really fresh and honest and real. So I really appreciate that. And the thing that also resonates for me is it definitely does sound very legitimate, right? Because obviously one of the ones that pops into the Bitcoiner's mind is Skybridge Capital, of course, which is Scaramucci's instrument, and he's getting quite a bit into Bitcoins now. So I think it's a very interesting kind of name. It has a very it has a surprising kind of bridging legitimacy, as well as kind of a guess what, like wink wink to the degen DeFi types. So it's very, very good. I really appreciate that a lot. So would
The
love to
bridge
yeah,
part
go
was
ahead.
thought out. I mean, I knew that we were kind of bridging crypto, and
Yeah.
we were bridging crypto and traditional finance. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't even think the name DeFi had been invented, because I remember seeing Set Protocol after I had written the white paper for Barnbridge, and I was kind of like, well, they're kind of creating these token sets. They are tokenizing representations of other pools of capital. They'll eventually like figure this out. And the reason I called it tranches is because like Joel Montenegro hadn't even written the concept of what a proof of liquidity was at the time. So otherwise, I would have probably called it proof of risk instead of tranche, and maybe we wouldn't get bucketed or tranched into this whole CDO space. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was very serendipitous and ubiquitous, and I love the name. It just worked out.
Yeah, that's a great story. So, curious if you have kind of any top of the head numbers. Like, we're always interested to understand kind of growth or traction, or just how big is Barnbridge, and how do you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I try not to like talk too much about price, but I can at least like touch on like the high level stuff that's like easily available on CoinGecko.
Yep.
So like it's 250 million in fully diluted market cap, which I think is important for people to understand, because our actual market cap, because of like the circulating supply, is around like 28 million. So I wrote like a long article when we were kind of going through price discovery to let people know like this is the difference between like market cap and fully diluted market cap, and this is how impermanent loss works if you essentially go into our yield farming pools for Uniswap. But right now we have about $400 million in total lock value on our yield farming uh, pools, uh, which most of that is in the stablecoin pool. So like $360 million of that.
Yep.
There's like $15 million that's in the Uniswap pool, which the purpose of the Uniswap pool is to ensure that there's liquidity for bonds. So if you want to buy or sell it, you have the ability to get in and out of it. And then there's about $10 million of bond locked in the pool that essentially provides bond for bond staking. So yeah, I mean, even when we were originally launching, I think like the most money that had ever gone after a non-price token for like a proof of capital distribution was like $11 million, and we were at like $200 million in pool one before like the bond token had ever been released. And I think at the height of everything, it got all the way up to like $600 million in that pool, which it is a little bit. It was stressful at the time because like our contracts were audited. I mean, some of the people that work with us work at Consensus Diligence, and I remember that like Samsung had looked through the contracts just unofficially to kind of make. I mean, there was just so much money in them. I think the whole Ethereum ecosystem was looking at it, and the fact that it didn't get hacked and nothing went wrong. The longer it was in there, the better I felt about it. But I can't say that I was definitely stressed because we're responsible for people's money, and that was a lot more money than we were expecting to be in those pools. So where's that money going, or what do we hope is going to happen to it? The reason we did stablecoin pools is our DAO launches in the next couple days, the next like 10 days, depending on what comes back from the audits. A lot of what's in pool 3 will convert over to the DAO, because you essentially will have bond for bond staking there, as well as the ability to have time weighted voting based on how long you've been staked on the platform. And then the smart yield product, we're hoping that a good chunk of that $350 million that's staked in our pools will convert over to the actual products, because those are where most of the yield, that's where most of the interest rate fluctuation is in stable coins. So USDC, SUSD, and DAI. So yeah, crossing our fingers that all of that crosses over. But it's been a very, very successful launch, and a lot more than I was expecting a year and a half ago when I was trying to tell people why we needed to tokenize risk.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I really appreciate the process, right? Because, what you described is you described what I call scratching your own itch, right? So, in a sense, like that's one of the really great ways that good products get developed is that, you're kind of like, well, I would like to do X, but nobody else has developed a mechanism to do X, right? And in your story, you even reached out to Kain Warwick from Synthetics and said, hey, like, do you want to make X? Because if you want to make it, then I get to use it. So I'm perfectly satisfied, right? And of course, the rest is history. So, I think as a way of developing, I really appreciate that. I think it makes a ton of sense, and it's valuable. So one thing I wanted to talk about is kind of what is your sort of secret and or like unfair advantage? Like, do you have some kind of mechanism? Obviously, I think your experience with kind of traditional derivatives markets like CDO, but like, how would you characterize the Tyler and or Barnbridge advantage?
Yeah, so to start, I think it was a Tyler advantage. Just in that I've launched companies and sold companies before. Like my first company, I started when I was 21, and I sold it when I was 25. And uh, I've kind of consistently had this like entrepreneurial thing on the side that turned into my full time thing back in like 2015. And so I think in the very beginning, there's a lot of like very like technically adept people in crypto, but not a lot of them have like entrepreneurial experience or really know how to like start something and create it. And even though Barnbridge isn't a company, it never was a company and it never will be. It's a DAO. We essentially launched with our launch DAO and moved into what's going to be the Barnbridge DAO. It still helped, right? Like raising capital, talking with people, getting it done. And I also had a branding and UI and UX agency. It still exists. It's like one of the largest branding and UI UX agencies in crypto. And basically, I had a team that could like make a logo, crank stuff out, crank out announcements. And I had 15 employees over there, and like 3 of them came over to Barnbridge full time. But that was just the initial, like, let's get it off the ground, let's get it launched. I think the true advantage for Barnbridge is not me anymore. I think Barnbridge would live on without me, and it would be very successful. And the reason for that is if COVID did anything, I mean, COVID created like the worst year of everyone's lives, other than, the money we all made in crypto was amazing, or in DeFi specifically. But the one blessing that COVID brought to my life was there is a group of developers that worked at Consensus. They ran Consensus Romania. And I was working with them on a SaaS marketing product because basically Consensus uh, didn't raise that $300 million with JP Morgan. And they had to let people go because, like, I mean, ETH went down to $80. Joe wasn't trying to blow all of his ETH, essentially keeping that boat afloat. And so a lot of very, very, very good developing talent left Consensus. Either they were fired or their friends were fired and they didn't want to work there anymore. And so basically, the guy Malad, who helped me like build dev teams for other like SaaS things I was working on. I showed him this idea, and he was no longer at Consensus, and he basically was like, I would want to make this my full time thing. This is a really big idea, and so there's no way that I would have gotten access to the programming talent that I have now if I had launched Barnbridge when I originally had the idea. And my co-founder Troy, who launched it with me, that is just unbelievable with understanding governance, understanding tokenomics, and like what drives people to do certain things via incentives. Uh, he was essentially working at a consensus funded company. I showed it to him, and I think that he was kind of looking for what's next and what was the big thing that he wanted to work on. So I think the timing of everything, just again, so much with Barnbridge has just been, it feels just serendipitous, like it needed to exist because it's truly outgrown me. And yeah, basically, like we were doing audits with a group that's built. I worked with another dev team to build this like self-funded project I started called Bond.bet that is just going to plug into the Barnbridge DAO. It's like a sports betting protocol. And the guys who helped me build it, they came back to me and were essentially like, who wrote all this code? Like, this is the most beautifully written Solidity that we've ever seen. They're like, your developers are like superstars. And so, like, at the end of the day, it's not a company, it's a protocol. And the quality of development talent is more important than like me, who's kind of become the unofficial spokesperson of the project. And I mean, that's fair. It was my idea and I thought it up, but I decentralized the governance very early on. Where like, I don't have any more tokens than Troy does. And the development team actually has more tokens than me or Troy do. So I think that our advantage is that everyone working on Barnbridge is not like a me too, I want to launch a DeFi protocol. Like we've been in the space for a very long time building, and we really know what we're doing.
Oh, that's great to hear. One of the things I picked up from Tim Haley, who's a partner at Redpoint VC, is he comes from actually a recruiting background. And the thing that's fascinating is he talks about this concept of a supernova, right? So what happens in the tech industry is that organizations grow and they get really hot and they kind of like go nova, right? And so like Consensus was an organization that kind of like went into supernova mode. And the thing that is interesting about that effect is that he says that when the supernovas explode, they leave kind of star stuff like everywhere, right? So he's talking about kind of star talent and these kind of really exceptional people that are all scattered around, and in a sense it's natural for those people to form networks and kind of create new stars. So I think that was a really nice metaphor and a great way of reasoning about sort of talent and talent formation. So it sounds like you benefited quite a bit from there. So one thing yeah,
that
go ahead.
crypto as a whole benefited substantially from that supernova, because it wasn't like the companies didn't blow up, but crypto definitely hit a down market. And I think a couple things happened that I don't think that people who are just looking at the space now realized happened. One is that a lot of these companies had their treasuries in ETH and Bitcoin because
Yeah.
they raised in ETH and Bitcoin.
Yep.
And so, like, the number one thing that they could do for benefit of their project wasn't actually to make their token more valuable. It was to wait and not spend money until ETH and Bitcoin essentially went back up. And that's a dirty secret of the incentives of the industry. that I don't think a lot of people know is that like some of these projects with like Ethereum War Chest, they have no reason to make their token more valuable. They have a reason to make Ethereum more valuable. And I think one person that bucked that trend and innovated through the down market, and we are all benefiting because of it, is Kain Warwick. He was the one guy who had the balls to spend his Ethereum to fund innovation and fund innovation and fund innovation. And that's where yield farming was born. That's where all of the stuff, I mean, basically, I mean, even the Bitcoin maxis can thank Kain for what he did. And another thing that was very beneficial to the ecosystem was not just Consensus losing a lot of talent, it was also Coinbase. So in the last like ICO bubble in 2017, there were all these ideas, but all the talent was at Coinbase and Consensus. And during the down market, that definitely was no longer the case, and a lot of talent decentralized, and the industry is benefiting because of that.
Yeah, Warren Buffett says that it's important to be bold when others are fearful and to be fearful when others are bold, right? So in a sense, like when you're at this kind of like kind of the bottom of this crypto winter feeling, the thing that's very interesting is how amplifying it can be bold. Now, of course, in a sense, there's a certain amount of luck that comes with business timing because, it is also possible to just kind of burn out, and so I think that there may be a certain toughness that is necessary as well as kind of very deep conviction. So I think, those are the times that, try men's souls, as the quote goes. And, so it's definitely an incredible testament to Kain and his team, and, really wonderful to understand that better. So I guess
we should mention that synthetics, just for the
yeah,
people that don't know.
absolutely. Kain Warwick is the founder of Synthetics, SNX, and obviously a huge anchor tenant of the DeFi world and environment. We did have Kain on the Miko Bits show, so some of my audience will be familiar with his work. So, but I agree, it's a tremendous contribution and really a star performer, really wonderful, very open, thoughtful person as well. So really, really great, good shout out there. So, I'm interested to kind of inquire about your sources of inspiration, whether those be kind of just things that are happening for you now or things that are lasting. Obviously, we mentioned, synthetics and things of that nature in your background, but like, what kind of gives you juice and energy, whether it's personal or professional? What's currently, is there anything in the new year? I know you're a dog owner, that's a thing. So, just want to understand, what makes you tick, what makes you excited.
Uh, I've been asked that question before, and I think I the short answer is I'm not 100% sure why I'm always doing what I'm doing, where I'm starting these like companies constantly. And so because people asked me that, I guess when I had the success of Barnbridge was when people started paying attention. Um, the answer, when I really thought about it, is that I just like to build things. Like I like to build things that I like to use, and I don't think that I'll ever stop building things. Now with Barnbridge, I mean, we one like statistic, I guess, when people like numbers is we actually have the largest and most valuable DAO right now in all of Ethereum. Our launch DAO, which that'll all get converted over to the Barnbridge DAO, actually has like $90 million in it in worth. And so I look at that as a lot of that will be distributed to the community, but a lot of that will be able to work with the community, create grants, and actually build things. And I think the reason when I originally thought about it, like everybody says like, oh, I'm not in it for the money, I'm in it for the technology. And Ethereum's definitely bought me a comfortable life, but I'm not flashy. I mean, I have like a 2009 like Ford Escape. And so my wife asked me like, why when you make now that you've made real money in this space, like you don't buy anything for yourself, you don't want anything, you don't like, you don't have a Rolex, you've literally not changed
Yeah,
your
where
life.
where are the Lambos?
Yeah, I don't.
Just
They're
kidding.
in my garage that doesn't exist. So my wife asked me like, why are you like that? And I was like, because I don't really care about any of that stuff. I just like to build things. Like I like to build things and uh, like help my employees and like help other people push their stuff forward. And so I definitely benefit from that. Like I don't want to say like, I would do it for free. I probably would. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I really like building things. And now I'm like a kid in a candy shop because Barnbridge has blessed me with the opportunity to build a lot of really cool stuff.
That's fantastic. Well, it's that's good to hear. For me, one segment that we often do is the shout out segment, where we send some love to folks that we appreciate. I think you've done that actually a couple of times already. So you may have a naturally, I guess. You may have gratitude as a natural practice because you've already mentioned some folks, Joe Lubin, Harrison Hines, obviously Kain Warwick. So any other kind of you mentioned your team members. So it seems like you've already got this you got this part down. Any others that you want to throw on the pile?
Um,
Appreciation.
I would definitely say like Vitalik and Joe for
Yeah.
making this thing that I think is so cool. Andrew Keys and Mark Yusko, I think that they're probably like some of the original like TradFi guys that really got behind Andrew for Ethereum, Mark for Bitcoin, and really like I mean Mike Novogratz, like the people that were originally willing to put their professional reputations on the line and actually say this asset or just technology in general is worth looking at. And then I would say like the people who are directly attached to Barnbridge that provided the most value are obviously the team like Troy Malad, Bogdan and Dragos and the devs. I mean, just basically everyone attached on the Barnbridge team site you can go look at, and they're firing on all cylinders and providing value. But on the uh, on the actual like fun side, a lot of like people hate on like VCs in crypto and say they're which is
Bunch of vultures.
I want to fund a study one day that shows the difference between like retail, which is just like, less sophisticated investors, and actual like VC funds, like the sturdiness of their hands. Cause I actually would think that at least the people that we've gotten involved have actually been extremely supportive. And so, for one person I want to shout out is this person named Rahila Zafar, who I don't know if a ton of people know who she is in crypto, but she's one of those like super connector people that just got into Filecoin and Ethereum really early, and she
Great.
introduced me to Keegan and EJ from Fourth Revolution Capital, and they were the guys that originally, I mean, me and Troy put up the first 100K of what funded Barnbridge, but the first external people that wanted to fund it and get involved were them, and they also helped substantially from a modeling perspective and everything else. And so also Santiago from Fourth Revolution, I'm sorry, Santiago from Parify has been unbelievable to work with, like to the point that people have asked me like, hey, is Parify good? And I'm like, if you can get Santiago, go out of your way to get Santiago. And then also Stani from Abe has been unbelievable. He invested and has been nothing but helpful. Kane, Jordan from Synthetics. And
Wonderful.
then probably one person that I like want to give a special shout out to that I owe a lot to that a lot of people in the ecosystem don't know is Aaron McDonald from Centrality. Uh, he Centrality is an awesome protocol. They're the reason like I'm not an Ethereum maximalist. I worked with them a lot during the down market, and if I hadn't worked with Aaron out in New Zealand, I probably would have had to leave crypto at one point. And so he also helped fund Barnbridge. He was the main person who helped in 2019 with the original idea and helped me structure it. And so Centrality is one of those teams that's just out building, building, building on an island in New Zealand, and they're doing really cool stuff. So I probably owe him as more than anyone for why Barnbridge is a thing. Because again, I probably would have had to leave crypto and go back into the traditional world had he not existed.
That's fantastic. Really appreciate that, and it's great to hear these kinds of effusive recommendations and some names that I haven't actually heard much. So it's those are really helpful perspectives. So so the next segment is called Pocket Picks, and it's really about kind of these smaller projects or newer projects that you admire or like or that you're interested in. So do you have any of these kind of things? Obviously not investment advice, but things that you think are underappreciated and maybe have a lot of potential.
Yeah, one that I actually don't own at the moment because a lot of my money's in Barnbridge is the Rari Capital kids. I don't know how their project is only worth $10 million fully diluted. I mean, if you just think that they're going to stick with Rari for 10 years, they're like 19. Like they're building really, really cool stuff in the space. Some projects that like I am invested in, I would definitely check out Centrality and some of the stuff that they're doing. But on a more like micro and then like just DeFi perspective, the last projects that I invested in were a company called Bridge Mutual. They uh, I like them because they were like a non anon version of cover, and I think that insurance is something
Yeah,
that this.
I know Bridge. I know the Bridge guys.
Okay, yeah, I really like Bridge Mutual. I like Opium, who you mentioned. I don't know if they're going to be small because when they launch, they're probably going to be. I mean, I think they should be a massive.
Oh, they're raising, and I think it's gonna grow for sure.
Yep. So I would say Opium. That Andre is unbelievably smart. I really have liked working with him.
He was
And
great
then
on the show. He's definitely a terrific thinker.
you know that he's like he won like the national like the international like math contest as like a when he lived in Russia when he was
That
younger.
makes
Like
sense. I didn't know that, but he definitely is. He's incredibly bright and really great to talk to.
yep. And then I would say one project that I think everyone should look at is Kane's brother. He has two brothers, Kieran and Aaron, which is funny because like Kieran is a mix between Kane and Aaron. So his parents got like gave up naming him. And then but they're starting a protocol called Alluvium. And I'm releasing an article about BondBet this week that talks about like my theories long term on where DeFi and crypto go from here. And like when you talk about derivatives and you got derivative squared and derivative 64s, I think that like right now DeFi is experimenting like building on top of primitives that already existed. But where we go from here is obviously there's like a massive like explosion and innovation in that space. But I call like the future of DeFi D64, which is derivatives 64, but it's essentially like Nintendo 64 B64 because I think that it's going to be like so basically if you can think of a future where like games like gamified aspect like we're gamifying finance in DeFi right now, and then if you actually add like actual gaming, actual like betting, actual like media streaming all into this like ecosystem, you basically can like kind of envision a world where you're like live streaming a game and you've like bet on one of the two esports teams and you have like a NFT that's like overpowered in the game, but it's extremely expensive, but you can like drop it in the game to try to affect your bet and change the outcome. Like that's essentially the future that I think we're heading towards is this like ecosystem of just like online where you really can't tell the difference between what's finance and what's a game and what's entertainment. And so basically that's like that generalized theory of D64. Uh, the Warwick brothers are creating this thing called Alluvium, which is a really cool just NFT gaming project. And I mean, it's hard to kind of know who's gonna like play out and who's not in that space. Like I knew the Epic Game guys when they were like working in a trailer here in Raleigh, and they thought they were gonna die, and then they went their company was gonna die, and then they went and created Fortnite and it blew up. So like it's tough to invest in gaming. Like I don't think I have like the forte to be able to pull that off, but I just feel like anything that like Kane's not going to let his brothers fail. So like I would kind of invest in anything that he's doing. So it's called Lubin, and I think that's a really cool project.
Wow, that's terrific, and I love all the kind of like texture to it. I like the D64. That's fantastic. I go all the way back to the era of the C64 or the Commodore 64, which is kind of a super primitive 8-bit computer. So that kind of makes me laugh. And obviously, there's the Nintendo thing as well. But we do talk a lot about the future of kind of metaverse. So there is a bunch of things on my show, guests on my show that kind of talk about kind of building this new attention economy. And I think it is very exciting. One of the things that we do see is we see crossovers, right? So you actually use the word Forte. Kevin Chu from Forte actually was created esports team called Gen G. And actually yesterday I interviewed Brian Kerr from Kava. And it turns out that he actually created Fnatic, which is an esports team in Europe. So it's fascinating to see crossovers. I was actually at CoinDesk Consensus, and Vitalik doesn't like consensus at CoinDesk. Different consensus. It's a conference, and so he ended up in a boat on the river in New York, and so I was on this boat, and he was talking about World of Warcraft, and so Vitalik was talking about everything I ever needed to know about pump and dump. I learned on the auction house selling netherweave cloth, right? So and he claimed his main on World of Warcraft was a gnome warlock. So it's funny for gamers, right? Because gamers look at this stuff, and what I've learned is that a lot of people in the successful DeFi space actually have kind of multiplayer game backgrounds, because it kind of helps create these kind of artificial economies, and they're able to kind of understand economic flow. And they kind of engage those games from an economic perspective. So, I think it's interesting what you're describing, this sort of future.
And I think it will change gaming. I play one video game a lot, and it's called Madden because I really like the NFL and I'm
Yeah.
into sports betting. And so when I can't get enough football. And I was actually they have an in-game currency, and I was actually banned from the Madden auction house at one point because I figured out a way. I mean, this is like some gamers are gonna listen to this and get super pissed, but like basically, I like had a secondary account that I funneled all the money from my earnings through, and I found a way to go and like sell it on the off market through Reddit. And at one point, I was running like the largest like off market exchange for like this Madden coin currency, and they figured it out, and they like banned. I had to buy a new Xbox.
That's
But
amazing. That's so
yeah,
funny. I mean,
yeah,
it's reminiscent. It's reminiscent of some of the stuff Brock Pierce is working on with World of Warcraft gold farming in China, right? So that was a very interesting, and obviously, he hired an executive from Goldman Sachs to run that company, IGN, named Steve Bannon. So that was quite a unusual twist and a strange bit of history.
wait, the same Steve Bannon.
Yes. Brock Pierce hired Steve Bannon to run his World of Warcraft Chinese gold mining company, which it's kind of a head exploding fact. And to be honest, if you actually look into the history, it seems very clear that a lot of the toxic behavior that Steve Bannon brought to Breitbart as a publisher actually was learned from the gaming world. So this whole flaming and trolling and griefing and all of these kinds of like gamer behaviors actually were a source of power for the alt-right and the publishing industry. So, and this is all stuff that Bannon learned at IGN, at Brock Pierce's gold mining and farming company, which worked is similar to how you describe your effort, right? Which is people in China would mine World of Warcraft gold, which would be purchased by mostly US people using Visa cards. And the mechanism would be that, these sort of spam bot characters in the game which show up and deliver you the gold in the game that you purchased on the website with your Visa card.
Well, you don't have to worry about me going and starting an alt-right publication. I'm pretty apolitical up until where it affects how it affects crypto. But I wonder, is like Steve Bannon like an active Bitcoin
Yeah,
proponent? Because
he is actively in the Bitcoin space, and we do. It's similar to your thoughts. Like, we definitely don't delve too deep into the political, but we do occasionally touch regulatory themes, international themes, and obviously, famous people. So he definitely qualifies in that respect.
that makes me wonder, like, so like how attached like Peter Thiel and Steve Bannon and Brock Pierce, like how much like money's there, like if they like kind of coordinate or work together, because that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is a very unusual nexus. And obviously, as people know who are observers of the cryptocurrency space, Brock Pierce did have a presidential campaign. So, of course, people are wondering if Steve Bannon was involved in that, so we don't really know. But, it's an interesting speculation. Obviously, Steve Bannon is, one of the most sort of prominent folks associated with Brock that connects with his sort of political aspiration. So it's interesting, very interesting speculation. We don't really know any facts, but
I know some of the
but
people
the
that
history
work
is
on the
interesting.